College, a time in a young person's life where they venture out and discover who they are for themselves. It has been suggested that college students have a greater risk of developing a sexual addiction than the average American. Sexual addiction is defined as sexually related, compulsive behavior which interferes with normal living and causes severe stress on family, friends, loved ones, and one's work or school environment. A psychologist by the name of Patrick Carnes was the first person to identify and treat a sexual addiction in the 1970s. A key factor of addiction is the intensification of the addictive behavior itself. Of all known addictions, sexual addiction is the least talked about and probably the least understood. Sex addiction can come in many forms. These include, but are not limited to, compulsive masturbation, sex with prostitutes, anonymous sex with multiple partners, and multiple affairs outside of a committed relationship. With internet readily available on college campuses across America, it is easy for a student with a sexual addiction to waste hours watching and reading pornography online. The internet provides secrecy and isolation, as well as allowing sex addicts to fulfill any fantasy that they can think of. There is currently conflict in the psychological community on whether sex addiction is in fact a true addiction.
Christie Brinkley accused her ex-husband Peter Cook of spending thousands of dollars on internet porn. So, is this a true addiction? And if so, how common is it? Joining us is Ian Kerner, author of Sex Detox. Good morning.
Good morning, Julie.
Well, is this such a thing? Give me a working definition of
sexually. Well, first of all, the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, does not recognize the term sex addiction because it's so broad. So generally, the term hypersexuality, sexually compulsive behavior is what gets used. But it's very much a real condition, and what the latest scientific research is showing is that all addictions, whether it's an addiction to alcohol, an addiction to drugs, gambling, or sex, affects the human brain in the same way. So I think we can definitely say that sexually compulsive behavior is a very real problem for millions of people.
Define the behavior. Do you have to actually be having sex with multiple people to be a sex addict?
Well,
or if you're just looking at porn online?
Oh, absolutely. The internet, I think, has been the #1 enabler of the increase of sexually compulsive behavior. So whereas in previous years, you might have thought of a sex addict as somebody who's compulsively cheating, hooking up, having affairs, I think today millions more men are vulnerable, especially men, are vulnerable to sexually compulsive behavior because of the proliferation of internet porn and the easy access of internet porn. So I think that's definitely the #1 problem for people who are suffering from sexually compulsive behavior.
It's common to believe that sex is purely physical. However, sex not only happens in your pants, it also happens between your ears. When specific pleasure pathways are turned on and defense pathways are turned off, electric impulses flowing along paths of connected nerve cells called neurons trigger orgasm. The limbic system is the oldest part of the brain. The main function is to keep you alive and reproducing. It does this by avoiding painful stimuli and seeking stimuli that is pleasurable. The limbic system is the seat of emotions, drives, impulses, and desires, including sexual desires. Due to the design of the limbic system, you cannot will yourself to fall in or out of love or stay in love any more than you can will your heart to beat. The primary neurotransmitter involved with falling in and out of love is dopamine. Dopamine activates the reward centers in the limbic system. The more dopamine is released, the more the reward centers in the limbic system are activated. This activation is the reason that sexual addiction occurs. With each sexual behavior, increased amounts of dopamine are released, causing the person to crave more sexual behaviors in the future. When orgasm occurs, dopamine levels are similar to those as heroin use. An individual needs to top their last high or sexual encounter in order to reach the same level of their previous sexual experiences. Helen Fisher's landmark paper, Lust, Attraction, and Attachment in Mammalian Reproduction, broke down love into 3 stages of neurological responses. We will focus on 2 of Dr. Fisher's stages. Sex drive and libido are defined as the craving for sexual gratification without a desire for a specific person. Attraction allows humans to focus on and concentrate their sexual energy on a suitable partner. Feelings of romantic or passionate love are characterized by euphoria when things are going well, mood swings when they're not, focused attention, obsessive thinking, and intense craving for the individual. There are 3 main hormones that are involved in the attraction phase of love. These hormones are adrenaline, dopamine, and serotonin. During the first stages of liking someone, your stress responses are activated, which increases adrenaline and cortisol in your bloodstream. This is why many people who are deeply attracted to another person experience sweaty palms, a pounding heart, and dry mouth. Again, dopamine is involved, triggering the reward centers and causing bursts of euphoria. Dopamine causes a variety of behavioral effects, including more energy, less need for food or sleep, and increased attention and pleasure. Serotonin is believed to be the reason why new lovers continually pop in the minds of their new partners and why affection can become obsessive. Attachment maintains these romantic connections long enough for a couple's love to result in a healthy offspring. Oxytocin and vasopressin both contribute to your level of attachment, adding to the sense of calm, peace, and stability one feels with a long-term partner. Oxytocin is best known as the hormone responsible for inducing labor, but recent studies have shown that oxytocin is known as the cuddle hormone. It is associated with maintaining healthy relationships, whether that be setting boundaries or helping to mediate emotional experiences. Vasopressin is thought to be important in securing a long-term partner. A 12-step program specifically modified for the treatment of sex addiction is extremely effective. However, there are other factors that will contribute to someone successfully overcoming sex addiction.
There was a recipe. We studied the people who were successful. They did certain things. Had a therapist. They had to be in group psychotherapy with the therapist. They had to go to a 12-step meeting. And what became further defined for us is that it was just as you said. I'd go to meetings and it didn't work. I'd hear that. Well, I'd have you got a sponsor? Well, no. Did you ever give a meeting? No. Did you ever do service? What have you? It's really about getting involved in the process.
Yeah, did you ever do the steps?
Right.
12 steps is about 12 steps.
You gotta do that. You can't just attend.
Right.
But we found when I started doing, after we did that, and I started taking this recipe and doing it with hospital people, or patients, and following them.
Right.
The people who did that, they didn't slip. We found like 23–24% did the steps 1 through 9 in 18 months, and virtually nobody slipped if they did the work. That's what put me onto the fact how important it was. What I didn't know then, Joe, because science wasn't far enough along. Now we know why it works. Because in order to change the circuitry of the brain, you have to feel safe. Safety is the very first thing, because the brain will not change. And so, like for example, Amnesty International could not get torture victims to get into therapy until they put them in a room with other torture victims. You have to be with people who really know and can nod their heads. I know exactly what that feels like.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot with referencing that, which I learned from you, is that it's the mutual suffering that other people went through, prisoners, to where they don't have rapport with other people that haven't kind of been there in the trenches.
It's very important for that floor level of safety. And then the other part, one of the biggest things that will change the brain more than anything else, a story. Which is what the 12 steps are about, because the story is the most cognitively complex. In other words, it's the hardest thing a brain does, is to assemble a story. So addicts have to assemble their story.
Though sexual activity is common in college students, they must be careful not to overload their reward system with dopamine. Sex addiction, like any other addiction, is detrimental to both the addict's mind and social interactions. Although sex addiction is not in the current version of the DSM, the DSM-4, it is being considered for the DSM-5, which will be released soon.